Okay, we're here today in Lapeer, New York, with Grace Stone, who was the historian for the town of Lapeer, and we're here in her very special home. She's going to tell us something about this home and some recollections of being the historian in Lapeer and growing up in Lapeer. So, hello, Grace.
Good. Hello.
Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. And yes, this home is it was built probably in, we figure from 1820 on, in the 1820s. We can't find the exact date, and it was built intentionally to be a tavern, and it was a stagecoach inn and a post office. And the man who built it, his name was Royal Johnson, and he was the first postmaster in Lapeer, and we had the post office here. And so when we bought it, it was original. Nothing had been touched. The latches, nothing. They just had never remodeled. It was just as it was when it was built. And so we thought we'd apply, being a stagecoach inn, for historical homes. So we did, and then we got in the State Historical Society, and then they took it on to the National Historical Society. And it's called the Royal Johnson Stagecoach Inn. It's what it's listed in the National Historical Homes.
And you bought it from the Johnson family?
We bought it. It was built by Royal Johnson, and it was always in the Johnson family, and I don't think back then that they ever intended to sell it. We were the first ones out of the Johnson family. But of course we knew them. I grew up with them, and so they decided to sell it. When the mother had died, they decided, the boys, they did that, to sell the home. And when we came in, we had to strip the wallpaper off. It's all the original plaster. We sealed the plaster, everything. I mean, it's close to 200 years old, and it's the original plaster. And it has mortise tenon doors, the solid wood doors. And upstairs is a ballroom. It's a country inn, but the country ballroom. And it has the original fiddler's bench in it, where the musicians played. And and so it has a lot of history. Some other things that when we had the auction, we didn't have the auctions, the Johnsons did. The house was just full of things. And they had an auction with Jerry Wilcox, the local antique dealer. And it brought a lot of money from the relics that were in here. One of them was a canteen from one of the original Johnsons who served with George Washington at Valley Forge in that winter. And that was his canteen. Wow. And it was hanging in the cellarway here.
Wow.
And museums were here. They bought that, and there was burr bowls, there were quilts, there were looms and spinning wheels, nothing. Everything that was used was in the inn, really. Actually, they sold here. And in the ballroom in the 1800s, they had cotillions. There's a picture of one of the original invitations to the cotillion party, and it says, "Your company is respectfully solicited at a cotillion party at the house of Royal Johnson in Lapeer on Friday evening, the 18th of August, 1854. That's your Civil War, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then it has the committee, and then it has a room manager. Now, what the room manager was for, the only thing I can think of, when we've had parties up in the ballroom, you have to carry food up. And I thought, maybe they needed someone to do that, So I thought that was interesting,
It's
that
cool.
was one of the...
Was that found in the house, that invitation?
No, it was Mrs. Johnson. It was her invitation, the older Mrs. Johnson, and I got it from the Lapeer Historic. They had a picture of it, so I got it from there. And then in the 1900s, they had square dances here, and they said they had about 4 squares, I think, upstairs. And one of the men that grew up here said the way they had their parties, the square dance parties, they would dance until midnight, then they would eat, and then they would dance all night. and then go home. And he told me one funny story about one of the parties that one of the men, I guess, had too much to drink. And he left and he went home, took his horse and buggy, and he left his wife here. And he got home and he realized he'd left her. And he came back to get her, and I guess she was not happy at all. But that was one thing they had told about the parties here.
That's pretty wild.
That's pretty wild. Yes,
Did they give him breakfast in the
that's
morning?
quite a party. That's why I wonder. You never know. And I had heard too that there were several stagecoach inns in Cortland County, and they had the ballrooms, and they had kind of a little select group. They would all go to each other's houses and have the parties and the cotillions and like that.
Why was the Stagecoach Inn located here? This is on Route 222.
Well, this was called State Road. It was called Stagecoach Road.
Okay,
This was Route 77, Stagecoach Road, there was a route from Marathon to Hartford.
Okay.
And so the stagecoach went by all the time. And of course, when people back then, if they were going somewhere, they would stop in and stay. And of course, then the stagecoach came for the post office too every day, or whatever day.
Yeah,
I don't know if they came every day, but how often the stagecoach came. And our front step, there's no steps on the front door, and the stagecoach would pull right up to the door, and the guests could just step right in, and then they go upstairs to their rooms or whatever. And apparently, whichever place, there was not steps here, so maybe the stagecoach stopped at either door, or the post office, they might have stopped at one of them. And that way they could just step in. So there was never any steps built for the front step for that reason. And there was the open stairway, and they probably, when they came to the cotillions, they could just pull in. And in the ballroom, there was a division of doors. They've been taken down now. And we saw it in another ballroom over in Oneonta, that these doors were pulled, like when the ladies came, they probably wanted, like they didn't have bathrooms like we do today. And so they would, someone who knows a lot about stagecoach skin said they would pull those doors, and the ladies would freshen themselves up or put their dresses on, and then they open up and have the party. Or sometimes it could be used for another bedroom during the week if they needed a bedroom. And we also have, as far as having anything ourselves that was original in the house, everything went so expensive at the auction, we didn't. But we were given a spoon wheel that's out there. It was a spool wheel. It's like a spinning wheel. And someone gave that to us. They said it should come back home. So they gave us that. And then the Johnson family, about a year ago, they had taken one of the Jenny Lind, the spindle beds that was used here when it was an inn. And it might have been a rope bed originally. And they took it for their daughter. Well, she came back home from the service. She didn't want it. So they said it should really be in the inn. Nice. So we put it up in the ballroom because it's the an original bed that was used here.
How many bedrooms, when it was an inn, do you know how many bedrooms there were?
Upstairs is the ballroom, and there's 2 bedrooms. And the 1 bedroom was divided in half as an inn when it was the inn, so that would have been 3 bedrooms, plus if they used the extra one, that was 4. And down here there was 5. I'm assuming that front room where we have a bedroom, that would have been 5, and then there was another one which would have been about 6 bedrooms.
Well, that's quite a few.
And they said you never knew who you were sleeping with. I mean, they didn't put men and women together, but you might sleep in the same room. You never knew. They said sometimes they were short of room, and I was trying to think if there was anything else that it was in the National Historic Homes. And it does have, up in the attic, are all hand-hewn beams. You can see, and they have pegs. Our house was built with pegs. It's a post and beam house. Behind all of these are hand-hewn beams behind me in the corner. And the posts, the hand-hewn beams, go from the cellar clear to the top of the attic. So you can imagine the size of trees that it took to make this house. This being a parlor, this was a parlor, and the smaller room next was a parlor for their guests. They covered them, the hand-hewn beams. But out in the kitchen, the hand-hewn beams are not covered.
Maybe when we're done talking, we can take some pictures of some of the old woodwork in other parts.
You
kitchen.
might enjoy the upstairs
Yes.
in that sense. I mean, the beams are just
Mhm.
magnificent up in the attic. They're just different.
Mhm.
The way this constructed it was different, and the pegs are still there. It still has a well. There was a 25-foot well, hand dug. That's still out there, and it's still piped to the house, so it could be used. We don't use it, but. And the cupboards are original cupboards that when it was the inn, and I think that just about tells everything that it was. It was a stagecoach stop, and it was the center of town for parties. One lady that used to live over next door, their buildings are gone now. She had a diary that one of her ancestors had written that lived there, and they said that they would always come here. There was always parties, and we also figured too. I know in Cooperstown they told us that lots of times they would use the fiddler's bench for judge bench. They would have maybe town, those type. They were town meetings. Yeah, I know they had funerals too.
Really?
Because there was the churches. This was built before the churches were built.
When was it built again?
And it's in the 1820s.
Very, very early then.
Yes.
So this Royal Johnson, he must have come here from someplace else.
His father and grandfather came. Of course, I think they came originally from England, but they came down the Center Lisle area, and then they came up here, and I assume land grants, that they settled here. The first man's name was Abner Johnson that came here and settled here. And the Johnsons built many of the houses in this area. They built this house, and there's another house down next door that was what they called it was an inn. It wasn't for guests in a sense. It was men who drove drovers in was what it was called, and they drove cattle, and then they would come and stay in. So I call it the sister house down there. Johnsons built that. Wow. There was one where the town barn is. The Johnsons built that. Where there's an Amish family down there now. The Johnsons, and one of my mom and dad's first home up on Quail Hill was built. So the Johnsons built many of the houses in this area.
It's amazing it isn't called Johnsonville.
I know it. That's true, because they were one of the early pioneer settlers here, And so it has a lot of history, and
it's remarkable that it stayed in the same family
I know
all
it.
those years.
And they never touched it
It's
either.
so unusual.
Usually, you'll find where someone has done a remodeling
Of
or
course.
a half a remodeling,
Right.
or tore the cupboards out,
Sure.
and nothing. They didn't do anything. It was just as it is.
Like a museum.
It is a museum.
Yeah.
That's and there's original paint, milk paint on the door. That the antique dealer told us to leave it because it's almost a 200-year finish.
Wow.
That's milk paint upstairs. I love the upstairs is blue, and it's on the hallway, and that I love that milk paint. And the other doors, they had painted other paint over the milk paint, so we stripped it just to get back to the wood, the mortise and tenon, and to show the pegs in the mortise and tenon doors that were here. So I think, unless you had any questions about the house.
It's just so interesting that you're a historian and you ended up buying probably the most historic house in the whole area, right?
Right.
It sounds like it was fate.
Right. And that's why I said God had a sense of humor to me. But and people, we've had so many tours, and the Marathon Historical Society has been here several times and had picnics, and they just love to tour the house,
Sure.
and because a lot of people had never seen it. They knew what it was, and we've had people that grew up in the area, and then they, and they grew up in the area, so they'll come back and say, I would like to see, the tour, But that'll stop maybe in a moment. Someone's trying to call me. Some interesting facts. I don't know if you were interested or not. The first settler, and I was surprised about this, in Lapeer, it was in 1799, was a black man.
Wow.
And he bought quite a property down on the Jennings Creek Road area.
Did you
And
know
he
where
was from Guinea.
From Guinea in Africa?
Wherever Guinea is that Africa or South America?
I don't know.
I think New Guinea might be South America, but I'm not.
Probably.
Most of the historical things don't say New Guinea.
Yeah.
They just say Guinea.
Wow.
He was a black man from Guinea, and everyone has called me and said, how did he get the land? How did he settle it?
Yeah.
And we can't find any information. We've
Interesting.
searched and searched and can't really find
Uh-huh.
whether he was served in the Revolutionary War or something.
There were some,
and
yes,
maybe
yeah.
he was given land,
Yeah.
But he lived here all his life, and he passed away, and he's buried down there. They set on a big bluff
Wow.
down there.
Did he have a family that stayed here? Do you know?
That we don't know
Okay.
either. See, there's not much history
Yeah,
on him. All we
interesting.
know is he was the first settler
Mhm.
that came.
That's remarkable.
Isn't that remarkable? I thought that was very
Oh, yeah,
interesting.
that kind of blows me away.
It does. It's wonderful, really.
Yeah.
And of course, Lapeer used to be part of Virgil,
Mm-hmm.
and then in I think it was 1845, they separated and laid at Lapeer. Of course, we have two churches now. There were more, in the earlier ones, but we have Lapeer Christian and Hunts Corners Baptist.
How did it get? Do you know how it's got its name? Why it's called Lapeer?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Down the, I'll tell you
Oh,
that.
okay.
And
I'm
down the
jumping
road,
ahead.
in one of the known, very well known inhabitants of Lapeer, it did. And then also up the road, Parker Street Road, there's a cemetery that's a Revolutionary War soldiers. There were 16 soldiers from the Revolution that were in Lapeer. And they died here, I think they said, except for one. And many of them are buried up in that cemetery, the Revolutionary War soldiers, which is, I think the Cortland Standard did an article on it years ago. Ralph Pittman was a supervisor, and he brought it to their attention. And it's, it's quite
That's quite a
unique.
few in one spot.
Yes, it's quite a few in one spot. And I think I did mention that Royal Johnson, the man who built this house, was the first postmaster. And he also was like head of supervisor of the town for several years. And then there were, I know of two, but there were Native American camping grounds too. Down on Jennings Creek Road, I know people have found, artifacts. And then there was one up this road, up Parker Street. And then I was asked to say some things that I found out as a historian that I didn't know, and I grew up in this town. I was born in this town and grew up, but I found out things that I did not know. And the first one is that Lapeer is a dry town, which means no consumption and possession of alcohol is allowed.
No possession even?
That's what it said in one of the things. And I thought myself that a dry town meant selling it, no sales of it. And but in the records on Wikipedia like that, and the Lapeer, it says consumption, and I don't know
How
if
did
that's
they
true.
have their cotillions upstairs?
I know it. Yeah, they were right. So I'm thinking it's more prohibiting the sale of liquor in the town. And in the late 1940s, early 50s, there was a person over on Route 221 who wanted to open a bar restaurant, and he wanted to sell liquor in the bar with the restaurant. Well, a group of the ladies in Lapeer got together, and they got like a referendum or whatever to vote on whether to keep it a dry town or whether to open it up. Well, the town voted to keep it dry, so it's still a dry town today.
And that was in the 1940s, so.
Yeah,
That
was
is ancient history.
Yeah, that's not ancient history. The ladies even then, it was first made a dry town by, back in Prohibition, a group of ladies that were up on Quail Hill got together and made it, wanted it to be a dry town. And I think it was, I forgot what that was called, but there used to be groups that were against.
Women's Christian Temperance Union.
It was like that, yes, and that's how it got started.
It's always the women,
Yeah, that's how they got, and it was the women in the 1940s too that did that. And then another thing I found out I did not know, the highest point on Lapeer is Quail Hill, and is 1,862 feet above sea level, which is getting close to Great Peak and that. And before the day that they had telegraphic weather reports, there was a government signal station up on Quail Hill, and from which the waving flag could be seen by a way station in Tioga County, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And the part of that station is still there. It was destroyed by the town, group that did the roads. Somehow they didn't see it, and so they destroyed some of it. But one of the ladies that's interested in Lapeer history went up and took a picture of it, and I put that in the Lapeer records because I don't think a lot of people know that.
No, I never even heard of such a thing.
So it.
And that was used to forecast weather?
It was. It was a weather station, and I do not know what the waving flag meant. They could be seen in Tioga County, Pennsylvania, but
wow.
It was so high that somehow they used it for weather reporting, which I thought was kind of unique.
Unique.
The other thing I found out that I didn't know, and I did nominate them for outstanding citizens up in the museum there in Homer. They asked for nominations. Was G.L. Gutchess, George Gutchess, Gutchess lumber mill in Cortland. Well, he lived up in Parker Street, a farm up there. And he started a small mill there, and then it grew until he went to Cortland. And of course now, it's a lot. He was a noted citizen that came from Lapeer. And then there was the Squires brothers. I don't know if you heard of James Squires and Dan Squires. Well, James was born in 1819 in the house that George Gutchess bought from the Squires. He bought it from the Squires. And it was a well-known place back then. And James was born there in 1819. And then they said he chopped wood to pay for his schooling. And he served as postmaster and superintendent in Virgil, and he moved to Cortland in 1853. And in Cortland, he opened a store where Harold's Men's Store is now. And then in 1883, he purchased the clock, what is known as the Clock Tower building.
Interesting.
In 1853, and he served as a bank president, and he is the one who lobbied to get Cortland chose as a site of the normal school.
That's how I am familiar with it.
Which is now Cortland State.
Interesting.
And he served as a treasurer for several railroad companies. And then his brother, Dan, he was older. He was born in 1812. And he was instrumental in getting the division from the town of Virgil to Lapeer. And you asked who got the name, and they said it was Dan Squires who was instrumental in giving the name of Lapeer to the new town. And I think it's French, isn't it? I think
it sounds French.
Like some people say Lapeer, some people Lapeer, and then people who grew up here, we say Lapeer.
If you divided it, it would mean the father.
Is that what it is?
But it would be, you spell it L-A, right?
Right.
L-A would be feminine. In French, L-E would be male.
Okay.
You could say le père is
right,
father.
Right.
So I don't know what he had in mind.
I don't either know what he had. He said it was because it was the best or something, he considered, I read somewhere.
Maybe he didn't know his French.
But he didn't know French. yeah, right. And he was the town representative on the county board, of supervisors from 1847 to 1871. That's a long time.
It is.
And he was chairman of the board in 1866. And some of the things it says here, he was a school commissioner, he was a superintendent of school, he was a justice of the peace, he was a justice of the sessions, he was a member of the New York State Assembly in 1865 and 1872. And he served 22 years in the New York State Militia, and he rose to the colonel. He was a colonel.
Now, did you say you nominated him?
Both of them. They didn't get it, but they were nominated.
Well, they choose him every year. He certainly sounds like someone that's a notable person.
Both the brothers.
Both the brothers.
I put them in together. I nominated all three of them at one time.
Yeah.
down the each year. He was also one of the first to champion the cause of temperance. And another thing, he was one of the founders of First National Bank of Cortland. So, they were citizens of Lapeer and grew up. And the one story that I don't know maybe it's been told about his brother, James, was a bear almost got him. His older brothers and sisters of a large family, and a bear was coming after him when he was just a little tyke, and his sisters and brothers ran and got him and took him in the house. So they said they would have done away with a notable citizen of Lapeer, and so that's the things that I learned that I didn't even know, when I became. And another thing I found out, I was going to tell you about my history in Lapeer. My mom was a Quail. And the Quails actually settled Quail Hill and Quail Hollow. They came here and they settled that whole area. And I knew that my great-grandfather was Irish. I knew that. But I didn't know much of anything about the history. But when I became the historian, it was in there that back would be my great-great-great-great-grandfather. He came right directly from Ireland.
To here?
And he came, and he was here with my grandfather and his father and grandfather, and then another thing that was interesting. My grandfather Quail, who was Irish, was married, or I'm not married. His mother was a Lincoln. Her name was Mary Lincoln, and we've traced back to Abraham Lincoln. Really? Yeah, and I did that when I was as historian. Wow. I have a cousin, Lori Tillotson Tebby. She's the historian of Marathon, but she's my cousin too. And so we did it together, and we put all the names back. And what it is we would be a cousin. Right. There were two brothers, and Abraham had this brother, and we had this brother. Wow, how and it went down. Wow. But Mary Lincoln was his mother, which would have been my great-great-grandmother. Wow. And she's buried in Central Isle. And,
that's fascinating.
And so,
So I'm with an illustrious person here today.
I don't know, but
I've never met a descendant that was related to the Lincolns.
It's way back. You go way, but we have all the names back. Each name. There was so many Thomas Lincolns, and so they were all the same names all the way down through. And it was very interesting reading about how the Lincolns settled, and she came. She and her father came. Originally the Lincolns, were in. Oh, now I've just pulled a blank. Massachusetts, but they did go to Connecticut, and I think she came with her father, who was her father of Abraham Lincoln in that era, and they came here from Connecticut. And well, some of the memories I have of growing up in Lapeer. I was born in my grandmother's house about 2 miles here up on Quail Hill, where that top of the hill is. I was born there.
The highest point.
Yeah, I was born there. And my mom said I was born around noon, and she said that, she called him Granddad, he had gone out, they were doing hay, how they did it back then in 1940s. And he came in and said there was a new granddaughter, which is me, I'd been born there. And so I've always, I'm just born. I wasn't, and
you just moved down the street.
Yeah, just moved down the street. Yeah, I've been here and there and everywhere, but I ended up back home.
Like we said, fake.
Yeah, back home. And I remember when growing up in Quail Hollow, it was basically all family. It was like a clan. It was all my dad was a Homer, and my mom was a Quail, and those were the two families. And there were a couple other families too, but it was mostly relatives, so I could walk to all my grandmother's houses, so it was really kind of neat, and back then too, I remember we used to go in a buckboard, if you know what a buckboard is, to Hartford to get groceries it was another stagecoach stop over in Hartford. There's a place there that used to be Tennant's store, and it's still there, and it has a ballroom too.
How far down? How far is Hartford down this way?
I don't
Roughly,
know. Maybe
less than 10 miles.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yes. Just go out this way, and you're in Hartford. Not very far. And so that's why we went in the buckboard. They would go to Hartford instead of going to Marathon.
Sure. So that would probably make you'd make a day of it, right?
Yeah, right. And I have a picture of my mom all dressed up. She'd had the hat on. We looked like little house on the prairie. She had the hat. And she was dressed up, and my brother and myself. And then eventually, you know, the buckboard went away, and my dad had, you know, we had chalked in horses, and I remember, you know, the horses and all. You know, I grew up in that era, and also I remember in the fall they had where they would grind the apples. It was like a homemade, you know, home press to make cider. You know, we'd make the cider, and of course maple syrup. My grandmother's house that I was born in, every time I go to her house, you know, she would have the syrup boiling on the back of the stove, and maybe she'd be cooking meat that they had hunted, and then they would put, I don't know if you ever did it, where you would cook the maple syrup and pour it on snow, a pan of snow, and then you'd take a fork. And
I've never done it, but I've had it.
We used to go to her house when we were just
cool.
little kids, you know. That was a treat.
Sure.
We had a party. It was actually a party at her house. We'd all go and have maple syrup on
relatives.
snow. Yeah, I had maple syrup on snow.
That's cool.
And then ice cream course was made with the like my mom, they would just put salt in a pan, you know, with ice, and cook the custard, and then and you just stir it till it was ice cream. And then they had, of course, the old crank ones too, that you made ice cream. I remember that. I used to fish for hours in a creek over in Quail Hollow, and I would catch brook trout. And my cousins, we'd both be fishing, and so my aunt would fix them, you know, clean them and fry them. They were really good. We had a little brook trout. And so we did a lot of neat things like that for fun that kids don't do today. You
did it with other people in your family.
So
it probably brought you pretty
close together. The cousins, you know, you would always. And another thing that I don't know, maybe you wouldn't remember, but they used to take extra hay. Of course, hay was put in loose in the barns, and if it was extra, they'd make stacks. And so we would slide. It was just like sliding down a slide, and you'd have a party. I mean, the kids, and I loved to wear old high heels that were my aunt's or my grandmother's, and I wore those high heels up that. I got a picture of me up on the top of that and slide down that hay stack.
How did that feel?
It was slippery.
Was it really?
Oh yes, it was so slippery. It was. And I think back, I don't know how my mother let us do it, because a lot faster than coming down a metal slide. I mean, you really, when you got started, you just slid. Must be the
it was all
hay.
in the same direction.
Yeah, and the hay must be with the rain and everything. The outside of it was dry, so it was very slippery.
Boy, that's cool.
It was cool, and I remember too. My mom would what they call drive the horse off. Like they would load the hay off and then put it on a fork, and it would go to, and then wherever they wanted to drop it in the barn, they would drop it. But you had to pull it with the horse. And so when I was just a little girl, I was not very old. I don't think I was even in school. My mom would drive the horse to the, until they would say whoa, and then they would drop the hay in the barn. And so, a little different than what they do today,
Very different.
I was trying to think if there was anything else.
Where did you go to school?
Marathon.
So was there, how did you get there? You didn't
bus.
walk? Oh, a bus.
They had the bus.
So from did you go to kindergarten, or was it?
Yes.
From kindergarten right through high school?
Oh, Marathon, yeah. Marathon school, yeah. Now the change came when my mom was, she went to, there were about, I think, at one time close to 8 schoolhouses in Lapeer.
Wow.
And she went to the one on Quail Hill until she was, I think, it was in the 1930s that they, centralized, and then she went to high school. And so she got into the change from the, the small schoolhouses to, to go to the Marathon. But they were all centralized when I was born. And, and we rode the school bus in. I don't know, unless you have any questions.
When you graduated from high school, you stayed in the area? You stayed here?
I did. I got married, and we stayed in the area. my husband and I lived on Jenny's Creek down in Lapeer, and then we moved different places. He wanted to go to college to be a pastor, a minister. So for a year we were in Pennsylvania at Baptist Bible College for a year. But then my mom got terminal cancer, and when we came back, it was just too hard to go back. So he drove bus and farmed it, and then when he retired, he pastored a lot of the little churches around here, because they, like Hunt's Corners and Kilowog and like that. So we mainly have lived in the Marathon area, but we moved back to Lapeer when we did not tell our children, because we had downsized to a small home, one-story home, retired.
As people do.
Yeah. And then this came up. My husband said he didn't tell me for a week or two because he knew what he was in for if he told me. And we did not tell our children because we did not know what
they would try to chop you out of it?
Right, or commit us on one or the other. And so when we had the for sale sign, if they would come, we would hide the for sale sign. Well, one time our youngest son came and the sign was there, so that it was out. But when we got it finished, then everybody wanted their parties here. We had the showers up in the ballroom for the grandchildren. And we had one granddaughter who went to China, and her party she wanted out on the lawn. So they they all fell in love with it, the grandchildren.
And when was this that you moved? That you bought this and moved here?
It was in. Isn't that awful? I pull a blank.
It's been a while.
It's been 11 years.
11 years. Oh, not that long.
No, not that long ago. Yeah, and we didn't move in for 2 years because we had to have it rewired. We had to put a new furnace in, and we had to we oiled sanded all the floors, took paint off on all the floors, and then oiled them, and stripped the paint off and sealed the plaster and did things like that, and so.
It's a labor of love. It's obvious it's a labor of love.
Well, the thing that we thought it would save it because there were some people that were interested in it that wanted to just sell the lumber, tear it apart, and sell the lumber.
Really?
And I just felt like, I would hate to see a landmark go like that.
That would be awful. It is old growth lumber. It's the old lumber.
It's virgin forest. It was virgin timber,
but
yes.
Still, the thought that somebody would tear it down for lumber.
And so that in that
thank
sense,
thank you for saving it.
And I hope someday that someone will like to keep it that way. If they don't, they're free to do whatever they want with it. I mean, we're free to do whatever we would like to with it, but it's just a shame if it's
beautiful. And hopefully we can, when we finish this, we can look around a little bit and take a few pictures of special places. Although the whole house is special, but some of the places that you've mentioned in your talk.
Right. I think that that is all that I have, unless you have questions about something.
No, I think you've covered everything that we were interested in. I know I'll think of things later on, but for now, I think you've covered it really well. It's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing it, for being willing to share it.
I just love it anyway.
Well, it's obvious that you love it.
And so I enjoyed it. You're welcome.
So these beams,
they're oak, they're solid oak, and they run from here out to the end of the kitchen, and they're 37, I think someone told us, 37 feet long, hand-used beams.
Wow, that's remarkable. And this is the original plaster, you said?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
It's the original plaster, we just sealed it.
And the floor is obviously original.
Right. Yes, all the floors are original.
And you said you had to strip paint?
We stripped paint, many coats of paint, and then sanded them and oiled them. and they advised to oil them. This was the room where the post office was over here.
This little room?
Yeah, it's now, it was the Johnson's family den, you know, all the men had it as the Johnson den, and now my husband, that's his, where he has all his stuff.
Oh, that's
But that was the post office, and the original, you know, where all the post office boxes were on this wall. But one of the Johnsons, they took them out and burnt them. But the George Washington and Abraham Lincoln pictures that were in this post office room were sold at the auction. A man from Marathon bought them. They were the pictures that were in the post office. Bins. And like we keep flour, and I imagine that's what they did, you know, the flour and the potatoes, and the cupboards are probably, when it was the inn, it was easier to serve. See the door?
So it goes right through?
Yeah, it goes, you know, that goes right through to the other side.
Oh my goodness.
And we use this as a baking breakfast room, the room next here, but this was the Johnson's dining room. They had, you know, a dining room here, but we use it as, I use it as my pantry, like my bakery and breakfast room, you know, for, and then the cupboards on each side. I stripped all of these. They had 10 coats of paint on them.
My goodness. 10 coats?
It was, I think it was. I don't know, I can't tell you how many. The stripper, I used natural stripper, and I can't tell you how many times I put it on before I got to the wood. But they did have the old molding on the.
After a couple hundred years, I guess you'd have a few coats.
Yes, true, true.
So these chairs are
they're from the Lapeer Christian Church. Just a few years back, the church, you know, remodeled, and so I grew up in that church from the time I was born. I grew up in that church, and these chairs were bought by G.L. Gutches.
Oh my goodness!
And so his granddaughter knew that they would mean something to me, so I bought them when they took them out. The door.
This is the front door. So this is where they would have come in
for the cotillions or the parties. No step. They would just step from the stagecoach into the door.
So these floorboards were trod on by
a lot, and these stairs, actually, you can see the Johnsons said they hardly ever used the stairs. They slept downstairs, and one of those grandsons slept upstairs. So they said it was all the, you know, in the years past that it wore the stairs. And these have the handmade. I stripped these because they has the handmade nails in there. You know, where they, and they haven't moved in 200 years. They're solid, and I think this is pine. It was a hard work.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I thought it was going to do me in.
This is the blue milk paint. That's original.
And the way they made milk paint, it was made out of the whey, and they added lime, and then the color. Like if they, you know, had color from fruits or whatever. They would add that for the color, and then the rest of it was whey and lime. And it lasted forever.
The paint on the floor in here is original paint?
No, that is milk paint, but that wasn't original.
Those are very wide boards.
Yeah, I would. In fact, I would like to strip them, like I have these boards. We strip these. I love these.
The color is beautiful.
Yeah, it's a pine.
Beautiful. Oh, the sun's hitting the door so we can see it.
And this, I don't know, the Marathon Historical Society made this, and there's our house on it.
There you go.
Yeah, right here, the Royal Johnson Historical Society.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they made these with all the historical places in the Marathon area, and I think they're still selling them.
This is the original fiddler's bench that you were telling us about. I can see why they might have had some town board meetings or even some court sessions here.
And then Royal Johnson, that built the house, signed this. You can see some of his figures, and that's his signature.
Now, was that obvious when you?
We just left it, and sealed it. That was there. And this was one of the people that used to come to the parties and lift, and he signed the wall, so we saved that too. It was Grace Parker, Lapeer, New York.
Oh my goodness.
You can see the plaster,
Yeah.
see the crack, that's
Yeah.
the original.
She
And
must
this-
have enjoyed the parties.
Yes, and she actually lived here when she
okay.
married into the Johnson. This is milk paint also. We left all of this in the ballroom. It's the original milk paint.
It's quite a room.
Mm-hmm.
You can just kind of picture them having their
Their
good
parties.
times.
Yeah.
And then the door, I can see, is that where they would bring the doors out?
Yes,
all
right
out?
there. And two of the doors I had behind that tree. That
Oh, I see them, yes.
For parties,
Yeah.
I used that. But this was the track, and that was two of the doors, and they would close that and open it for the party. And this is the original Jenny Lynn
Beautiful.
bed that was in the inn. It was used, and it does have holes, like it might have been a rope bed originally. And I didn't realize how it got. These beds got called Jenny Lynn. She was, a beautiful soloist with
Yes.
Barnum and Bailey,
Right.
and she loved these type of beds to sleep in, so they started calling it the Jenny Lynn bed,
And these are the,
we bought ours because in the auction, the original Lincoln and Washington pictures were bought at the auction that were in the post office. So the Johnsons had put them up here, so we just bought our own.
that's appropriate.
Yes. And this one is, this is an antique that was done with a feather, it's textured, that's how I looked it up and the artist is famous.
Wow.
That did this of George Washington. It's actually a collector. I didn't realize it. I bought it at a garage sale.
Somebody didn't know.
No, they didn't. This is the article that I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but this is the article that the Cortland Standard did on our.
Yeah, I can see it. It's remarkable history.
I love this room.
Oh, I bet. They couldn't have been too tall,
No, this is a country inn,
Yeah.
and country inns. The same with the sister one that was the Dover's Inn. The ceilings are low, and they did that. It seems in the country inns, the Victorians had the high
Yeah.
ceilings, but the country inns seem to be shorter.
though. Well, it's easier to heat.
Right.
when the ceilings
It
are
could
lower.
be right.
So this is the attic with the hand-hewn beams that run all the way the length of the house. And the other beams run all the way up and down to the cellar, you said, right?
Right from the attic to the cellar.
Wow.
Yes.
It's remarkable. It's in such wonderful condition.
And it has not moved. The peak, it's just square still,
Unbelievable. They knew what they were doing
They
when
knew
they
how
built
to
it.
build, yes.